Oh, that's okay. Looks like we're live now. Oh, the notifications come up in StreamYard.
Didn't show up. So are we live in Facebook?
Let's see.
I don't see it yet. Nothing yet. That's all right.
PonaQuest. Did you put it PonaQuest?
I did. Um, yeah, I didn't get a
Oh,
notification.
we're live. Yeah,
Are we?
26 seconds live.
All right.
right, so we are live, Steve. Good
So
morning.
welcome everybody. We just wanted to pop on today. Rick and I were actually doing kind of a business meeting, going over the different things that we wanted to accomplish today, and Rick was sharing a recent situation that happened over the weekend, and so we were talking about it, and it was obviously something that created some very strong emotions with him. And as talking through, we kind of went back into how to deal with these things. And
What's
we
up,
got
Mike?
back.
Gonna go
Hey,
deep.
Mike. And we got back to the King's Court and everything. And what I was finding was we were walking through exactly what we were talking about with the King's Court. So this was kind of a case scenario. And I just suggested to Rick that, you know what, he should just share this with everybody. So he said, well, okay, let's go live now. So if it's okay, Rick, if you could just share with us a little bit about your situation, and you can get as deep as you want or keep it very generic, but just kind of give us some background as far as what happened, and then maybe if you can identify some of the things that triggered the strong emotion.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Mike, and thanks for you guys tuning in, paying attention. My daughter, I had a rolled vehicle this weekend, and I had an interaction with a tow truck impound. I went to the tow yard to take my truck out, my daughter's truck, and she survived. She climbed out of this thing. I couldn't believe it, but she rolled her vehicle on a Friday night and walked out of there alive. I'm pretty just grateful and thankful. But come Monday, come to go get the vehicle out, I honestly felt in that moment in time, and I hadn't prepared my mind to go into this situation. I know I didn't, but what I was feeling was this lack of compassion that I felt triggered me in such a way that I lost it.
Was that a lack of compassion from the company or the individual you were dealing with?
Well, I felt like it was. I felt like I was being. I felt like somebody wasn't being honest with me. I felt like in that moment, I was in a place where there were so many different pieces to it, like the triggers, it was very nostalgic. I was in a place where it reminded me of how I grew up, where I grew up in my dad's shop. My dad had a Unocal 76 and a muffler and brake shop. And, how they used to have the tires hanging up or the belts and the hoses and all of those things and the big Chilton models on the desks. And it was like walking back in time. And then, the woman come out with a face mask and, shield. And I said, I'm ready to pay. Can you give me the bill? And she said, well, are you ready to come take the thing away? And I said, well, no, I just want the bill. Well, I can't give you the bill until you're here ready to take the thing away. And I was like, ma'am, just give me the bill. Give me the bottom line so I can clear this and decide what I want to do. And she was in her process. Right. That was her process. I wasn't recognizing it as her process. I was recognizing it as you're holding me hostage. You're not being compassionate. You haven't, and so I was in that judgment mode, and I was beginning to get really, really pissed off. And finally, the owner had stepped in and agreed to help. And it almost removed me because I was so angry. I was so angry. I really was. And that was a side of me that quite honestly, I don't, it scared the crap out of me, man.
Yeah.
It scared the crap out of me. I mean, I wanted to I wanted to squash it. I wanted to squash that lack of compassion. I wanted to squash that. I wanted to destroy it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the reality, man. That is the scariest thing because I know that within me, like I have all of it within me, the capacity for all of the light and all of the dark. And all I wanted to do in that moment, I could not step outside of myself and be objective. I was so hyper focused in the moment, and it scared the shit out of me.
Yeah. Well, so there was no point during that where you saw this happening and that okay, I need to extract myself or anything, or you were just on autopilot?
Oh no, it was like it was building, and as it was building, I recognized that I needed to step out. In fact, my daughter and my wife had come and seen that maybe I was having some trouble, and so my daughter, I actually, there was a point I went to try to sit on a chair. I went to sit on the back of a chair, and I fell. I knocked the chair over, and I fell on my butt. And the guy looks at me over the counter, and he's, you're getting really close to having me have to remove you. Are you gonna, and I'm like, okay. And at that point, I just breathed, and I stepped out, and I breathed outside, and I still wasn't under control because the thoughts that were going through my head scared the shit out of me. They really
Yeah.
did. They scared the shit
Yeah.
out of me. I'm like, man, like, why? I wanted to destroy that. I really wanted to destroy that. That's not who I want to be. So today I came out, and when we're in this conversation, that's a side of me I don't want to play with. I don't want to look at that part of me that can be that destroyer, but yet it's fully me. I'm capable of all of it, and that scares the shit out of me.
Yeah, as we all are. So as we were having a discussion earlier, and again, I don't, this is obviously a very strong emotion, but we all deal with this at different levels on a day-to-day basis. So I look at it, and I was trying to explain to Rick, because, he's like, man, I don't want this part of me. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to acknowledge this. And I was trying to, probably annoyingly, because I'm trying to put a positive spin on it, saying, hey, this is an opportunity. This is something that it's just going to come back at you later down the road. If you don't work through it now and reframe it, life is going to present this situation again later. And you don't want to just avoid it, because that's what you were doing. You're trying to kill it. You're trying to destroy this whole situation so it doesn't address a fear that you might have. And so we had a discussion, and I brought up the King's Court. And you were like, man, I hadn't even thought about that. That didn't even come into my mind. Mm-hmm. But can you reframe what was going on using the characters of the King Court? Who was having the visceral reaction at the time, and who was not in charge at the time?
Yeah, the king was nowhere to be found, man. The king was far removed. I would say in that moment, it you call it the night, call it the subconscious, call it the program.
Yeah.
I'll call it the program, because what I wanted to do is destroy. And then what that function of, was I myself, fully myself? Was I no, it was my higher self. Where was I? Where was I on all of that, Steve? How does that relate to the?
So here's the nice thing about the King's Court analogy, is we don't have to look at everything as, oh my God, this was me. Oh my God, what kind of a terrible person am I to have this reaction and want to destroy people? You don't have to say this was me. You could just go, well, that was the night, and the night was doing its job, and it was doing a really, really good job at it. And so you don't have to go, okay, I'm a dark person, or I'm a light person. No, this is just a program that's been very well written, that's there for your survival mode. And so then we want to depersonalize this to bring the emotion down, right? So stop the night from doing the thinking right now. And then that's where I was suggesting you have to stand back as the king and go, okay, how would the king want this knight to react and respond in this situation? And
Oh, yeah.
yeah, and just as a side note, we can sit here and analyze why the environment triggered this response. We can go back into childhood and try to figure all of that out, but it's not necessary. It's
Yeah.
not necessary. We just recognize that this is what happened, and how do I now want it to happen?
Well, I
So
didn't even want to relive like feeling that, recognizing that because we can disassociate. So I have the ability to disassociate pretty well, but in this instant, I didn't. I did not have the emotional intelligence in that moment. I wasn't there. Like,
yeah,
usually I can be pretty. Like, that's what scares me. It's like I hit it. If I'm preparing myself first thing in the morning, I can usually come out and see everyone as a beautiful being of light. And this is where you were talking about reality. Well, what's reality? I genuinely come out every day with the anticipation of seeing the highest ideal in humanity. I'm not looking for the stuff and
yeah.
uh, and that's my program. And I wasn't there. I didn't see that. And does that mean that I'm blind? Does that mean that I'm?
No, it just means that you probably dealt with a lot of beings that did not have a lot of light in the past, and you learned that that's a pain in the butt, and it's painful to deal with these people. And so whenever it's presented to me, I'm going to destroy it. I don't want it to affect me, so I'm going to destroy this. So, so let's walk through the process for the people that are listening, how to rewrite the program, at least start rewriting the program. Is that all right?
Yes, please. I
So
want to rewrite the program.
So the first thing I would want to tell people is that if you don't start rewriting the program, you can't expect it to change down the road. You know, if you do the same thing over and over and over, you're going to get the same result. So what we have to do is we have to visualize and think about how it is that we want it to do to respond in that situation. So if you're the king talking to the knight who's ready to destroy this guy at the gas station or at the tow truck station, what are the instructions that you would want to give that knight at that and how to respond in that situation? If you were to rewrite that episode as the king, how would you want that to look?
Well, as a king, I think I would have wanted my king to be well represented. I sure wouldn't have wanted my knight to be out there being a jackass,
Mm-hmm.
and showing restraint and
So what would
I
that
mean,
look like? What
ah,
specifically, what would that look like hypothetically?
poised, compassionate, curious.
Mm-hmm. And what if you determined that that person was not compassionate, that was dealing with you, even if they were wrong, how would you still want that knight to respond faced with that?
Expeditiously.
Mm-hmm.
Expeditiously. I would want to expedite it. Let's move.
Yeah.
Let's take action and move.
And then what would be the outcome?
In that particular sense, the conclusion, the assimilation, the moving on, the cutting of the cord, the letting go.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, it was letting go of. Yeah, so I'm identifying with the situation as it was. It was the ability to let it go.
Yeah. And then what would your interaction with your family be from then on out?
Very peaceful, very smooth.
Yeah.
It was actually. I mean, with my family, it was actually very peaceful. It was very smooth. It wasn't a bad thing. It was just like, oh, okay, Dad's gonna, we'll help him out here. That's all.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that it turned out bad. It was actually I was able to have in closing, right, with this person, I was able to actually say thank you. which is really weird. I said, look, I said, please forgive me. This is not personal. This is not personal in any way, shape, or form. This is my projection. I'm projecting this on you,
Hmm.
and I'm truly sorry. I said, this is not personal. Please forgive me. I'm not angry with you. Please forgive me. It's not, man. We're okay. We're good. He was thanking me. But the reality is like in that, so how do you move? So great. We closed the door, exited, paid the money, moved on. And now I'm still sitting here having this conversation with you because there's an impact and I'm not brushing it away. I didn't like that side of myself.
Yeah.
That's the issue.
Yeah.
That's the issue, is because I didn't like that side of myself. So the lack of, and the other day when I did this video on this, it was the lack of unconditional love that I saw for myself was
Hmm.
reflected. That was the projection. That's how I analyzed it. But we're talking about rewriting the program. We don't need to relive this. I'm just sharing with you my understanding, how I gave it meaning for me.
If in this second scenario that you repainted, how much control do you feel you had it on in our hypothetical scenario? Do you get a feeling that you have now control over the situation?
Totally.
Yeah.
I did entirely, which is kind of weird to say, but I actually, like, my higher self was always present
Hmm.
and always there. But yeah.
Yeah. And I sensed that a lot of your fear was the lack of control. It was, I was not in control. It was the knight that was doing everything, and I'm the king over here, and I want to ascribe to be a higher level individual, but I didn't have control of this scenario. And so by rewriting the program, certainly not rewritten in a 5-minute session, but by revisualizing the scenario and how you could have control over that, should give you a better feeling that, oh, okay, this isn't this horrible person taking over and killing everything that is potentially harmful. I actually have control over this.
Got me this far.
So, and again, I really appreciate you sharing this, because this was something, again, they don't have all the details or anything like that, but this is something that people go through on a daily basis, sometimes to a much lesser degree, sometimes to a greater degree. Sometimes people are in this mode throughout the day. They are going from situation to situation, and they're in the fight or flight mode. They're just reacting. And the ability to rewrite those reactions are what's important. I guess the question I would ask is, what for you, you obviously said, hey, I don't want this to happen again. I want to fix this. What was the feeling that made you want to do that? What was the red flag that said, hey, this is something I got to change?
Mm. Whew. I just want to have a different experience.
So if you were to go back and say, okay, at some point, let's go to scenario one. I want to, whenever X happens, I want to be able to switch out of this mode and step away and start being the king. At what point would you say, this is when this starts happening, I'm going to make a mental change? What is the trigger?
Well, honestly, I wasn't prepared. I didn't prepare myself. Like, when in the onset, in going in, so having an intention, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if I rewrite this, I repack this, I see how I created it for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the initial conversation, like, I knew, how much is this going to cost? Really, $750 for me to leave my. I can get $300 for salvage. I mean, they'll pay me $115 a ton, and you want to be, so the initial thing was like, you're ripping me off, and now you're doing it. And so again, it was that lack of compassion.
So let me rephrase my question.
I'm getting sideways now.
Let me rephrase my question, and because
Okay.
I didn't communicate it very well. If you're the king and you're giving instructions to the knight,
Mhm.
at what point do you want the knight to call you up and say, "Hey, I need you to intervene here"? What at what point? And this is very non-specific. What is going to occur with the knight that you want, that the king would say, "Hey, when you get to that point, I want to intervene"?
I guess it comes back to the intentionality of it. Like, what was my intention in going in? So, and what I'm trying to describe is something less than my highest ideal. So
Hmm.
I'll describe it, and
Hmm.
recognizing that I'm describing something that is less than what it is that I want to be, but yet I consider myself a good businessman, right? I
Hmm.
mean, you got to be frugal. And my thought was, well, how do I make it cost less? And when I couldn't control the outcome, even after having done some due diligence a little bit,
Hmm.
and I couldn't control the outcome, and I felt I it was that at the point of no control, there's no deviation and a recognition of like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not going to get anywhere. This is their process. Like, this is, they go through, and I recognize that. So it was at the point that I recognized there's this is a fixed outcome. This is going to be this outcome. This is acceptance of this. Like, you can't
Hmm.
change any of this.
Hmm.
No matter how much you've prepared or thought you could, you can't change any of this.
Yeah.
And that was the, I think that's the place where I got really pissed.
Okay. And then, but before that, when you walked in and you saw the environment
Yeah.
and you saw the belts and the Chilton manuals and all that, what?
I actually made statements to the guy as I was like, this place is a dinosaur. Like, this is ancient.
Tell me how you felt though when you went in. Tell me what occurred, not in words, but how did you feel?
I felt like the door, like the bells were ringing on a door when you're walking in. And I felt like I stepped back into a time that I was very young.
Was it
Like,
a
I was a kid.
was it a pleasant time or
I
anxious?
don't, I don't know that I was ever, I don't know what that means. I really don't know what that means. Like, because there such a mixed bag of emotions in that environment. I mean, a gas station. I grew up a grease monkey. My dad owned a Unical 76 and a muffler and brake shop, and I grew up turning a wrench with him. I mean, that was where from the time I was, 10, 11 years old to 16, I
Hmm.
went to work every day. I went to work every day pumping gas with my dad and turning a wrench and washing everybody's tools and in between all of the schools and all that stuff. It was like I was the only kid in junior high school that had a full-time job. I mean,
Hmm.
that was what I did. I went to that environment. That was the environment, and I felt like I was on the other side of the desk with no control. I'm here. I am. I'm on the guy on the outside looking in, and I got no control.
Yeah. So what I'm getting at is, um, if you're flying an F-15 over the ocean,
Yeah.
right, and your job is to defend a certain, no-fly zone area, the threat happens at quite a distance. It
Mm.
doesn't just show up in front of you, and then it's like, oh my God, I got to shoot. There's a chain of events, and the pilots are trained to respond to the chain of events. And as the threat approaches, then their response changes. Okay. And so there are red flags that happen very far off that are little bleeps on their radar saying, okay, I've got a potential threat over here. So that's easy for the pilot to recognize. Okay. But for us, when we get into a situation that is threatening to our subconscious, right? there are red flags, but we don't see the red flags. We don't recognize those red flags. We're waiting until that ship is right in front of us, and now the stakes are very high, and we're going to blast this son of a gun out of the air. Okay, it doesn't even matter how much of a threat it is at that point. And so what I'm suggesting is that if people start to recognize the threat when it's further away, before your night takes over and they're in full battle mode. And so how do we recognize those threats? And I would suggest that it's the feelings that you're going to start to recognize, that you need to start to recognize. So when you walk into a situation and you start to feel anxious, or you feel like you don't have control, those are the red flags that you need to recognize. And then you need to call the king. And again, when I use that analogy, it's the ability to step outside of that emotional zone. Mm-hmm. It's like calling the commander. Instead of being in the jet, you're calling the commander down at headquarters and saying, what do I do with this threat? Because you're emotional, you're ready to blast the guy out of the air. And the commander's going to go, wait a minute. No, let's look at it differently. These guys are doing training missions out here or whatever. And so that's what we need to do, is start to recognize the red flags. And I would suggest it's the feelings that are going to occur first, because the thoughts may happen. They're pre-programmed. I'm in situation, all the reasons that I was uncomfortable many, many years ago or whatever, boom, I'm anxious now. And that's the red flag. And so that, I would say, is the time that you can go, okay, I need to step out a little bit and reevaluate the situation so I have a better outcome. Okay. The lack of control. Okay. You felt that's a scary thing. People want to control their environment. You're anxious. Okay. Step out. Now let's reevaluate. Do I expect to have a certain level of control in this scenario? Is it possible for me to control this situation? Well, maybe not. You can't force them to give you a bill. Things happen that got into that situation, so it is what it is. But my point is that cooler minds are going to have to prevail at that time, and it's the feelings of anxiousness, fear.
My body was pumping. I mean, I can remember them. I mean, the second that she'd made that statement, like it was like yeah. It was. I mean, it's animated, man, because it was that feeling that just like everything in my body changed. My whole physiology changed. I was like ready, and I'm glad I can rewrite that program.
Yeah, and there are some people that cannot rewrite it on the fly. I mean, it's a skill. It's a muscle that you have to build to be able to be in the moment and then disassociate from the emotion that's going on and change it right then. That's not easy, especially if it's a very deeply ingrained and emotionally powerful program. So you might have to go, okay, when I feel anxious and stressed, or I get this feeling, what do I need to do at this time? How do I need to react? And you might just say, I need to disengage. I need to disengage from the situation and the environment, so then I can have a chat with the king over here and get better instructions, and then try to re-engage again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just started thinking about events, and there were still triggers. I was like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
It just like the little pieces where I felt like a lack of compassion or a steer. And these, again, I also recognize myself. I recognizing myself. I'm recognizing what it is I want to change within me, so that I can show up to be the highest ideal of me. So I can be that. So I can be the example and not the good example and not the lesson.
Yeah. And I think another important thing for people to recognize, and we chatted about this earlier, is you can't eliminate the triggers. You can't kill the trigger. You can't sweep it under the rug and pretend that, hey, anytime this happens, I'm just going to destroy it. It's going to be there. The only thing we can change is our response to the trigger. And that's what we have to focus on.
Well, I really appreciate just being able to walk through this, and thank you for helping me rewrite the program, Steve. Thanks for being my friend. And thank you guys for paying attention. This isn't the easiest thing to do, to have these conversations live, but you know what? It's probably the most liberating thing I can do for my own soul. You get to that place where you really don't give a crap about what other people think about you. The people that are really that have influence in your life that you allow to shape you because of their character. So the people that you allow in your lives, the people that you give influence to your life, to your family, make sure that they are for you. Know that they are absolutely for you.
Yeah. One of the reasons I suggested Rick share this was not only I think it's a benefit for him, and Rick's an open person anyway, so it allows everybody else an opportunity to learn from this experience. And I would suggest that some of you in Pono Quest, this is a safe environment. Nobody's going to judge you. Our goal is to help, is to give you ideas and different ways to think about it. Share some of your experience. And when you run into an issue like this, because I'm sure we all do daily, when you recognize a trigger and you had a bad result or a bad response, share it. And I was telling Rick earlier, it's not even so much about sharing it. It's about you thinking, if I share it, now I have to start recognizing these triggers in order to share it. And that is the hardest part. Like Rick said, he's in fight or flight mode already, and he's not going to recognize those triggers. And that is the first step.
We're human. We're human, divinely human. So yeah, embrace the humanity aspect of it and surround yourself with people that you can trust. And this is that safe place. So thanks for showing up. Thanks for participating. We're learning and growing, we're along the way. That's what this is all about. So thank you again.
Feel free to leave comments, feedback. If you learned something, that would be great. And again, of course, feel free to share if you run into these situations and want to share it for the benefit of everybody else as well.
All right. Have an amazing day. Aloha.
Bye, everybody.